You are now listening to The Step Through, a WNBA podcast with your hosts, Sabrina Merchant and Evin Gualberto. Evin, how's it going?
It's going great, Sabrina. How are you?
I'm great. So let's tell the people what we're doing here. This is going to be a weekly WNBA show with both of us just breaking down things that interest us in the league. For those of you who don't know, I cover the Sparks and the WNBA at large for SB Nation. And Evin does much more impressive stuff than that. Evin, why don't you tell the people about yourself?
I disagree. We're gonna start the podcast off disagreeing right away. But so I coach at the high school level, and I also coach at different youth basketball clinics and settings, junior NBA, Nike, breakthrough basketball, things like that. And if you're watching this, it's on my channel. Chances are you know me. If you don't, I do video breakdowns, player compilations, things like that. And I also do basically a podcast version of basketball film study on bouncing around. So
Yeah, so we're really excited to get into this because the WNBA season just started and we felt that there was more about the WNBA that we wanted to talk about. So who better than us to do it, right?
100%.
All right, so let's just get right into it. Evin, what is the main thing that stood out to you this week from the first week of W's games?
Well, I guess the biggest star of opening day up until today is Sabrina Ionescu, the Liberty 3-0. Sabreena doing everything that everyone expected of her from the jump. She only played 2.5 games in the wobble, and now she's lighting the league on fire.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like absolutely in favor of Sabrina talk all the time. It's just, how could I not be? But like you said, 3 wins for the Liberty already. That's exceeding their win total from last season. We've gotten to see all of the Sabrina specials that, became part of her persona at Oregon, right? Like she's got a triple double, number 10 in WNBA history, which I got to say, it's just, I know that there's like a lot of discussion about what triple doubles mean and what the stats are, if they're worthwhile at all. Having only 10 in league history when this is year 25 of the W seems like a very low total to me. Just, to have a little fun right off the bat, if you had to guess how many triple doubles Sabrina was going to have this season, what would your over under be? We're working with like 34 games, right?
Yes. Oof. I would say that probably, I know this is insane, 15, 20 maybe. I would say at least there are going to be at least 8 games where she's 1 or 2 rebounds or assists short, and that's it.
15 to 20. I was going to say like 7 or 8. So you're clearly a lot more ambitious than I am about what Sabrina has on top today.
So, I mean, just, to spoil something that's going to happen later in the podcast, or I guess, as the professionals say, to tease something. Mm-hmm. My background is coaching and film study, so I'm going to get into that a little bit later. So I have some clips to break down and reasons why I am optimistic about that. And I don't think it's crazy for that number to be the target that you can hit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I did misspeak earlier. It's 32 games, not 34. I always forget that the Olympic break throws a wrench into the whole schedule. But yeah, 32 games. So 3 in, she's got 1. Her pace at Oregon was about 1 every 5 games. I mean, like 15 seems a little high to me. Just we're talking like in every other game pace. She's going to get to 15. But the way the Liberty run their offense, like it's like the ball's in her hands all the time. She is going to have the opportunity to get at least points and assists every single game. And with the way they want to run the floor, like it makes sense for her to run the break as well. So they are going to put her in position to get these stats. Like there is no doubt about that. And judging by how excited Jasmine Jones was when she got the 10th rebound in this last game, they're going to be gunning for those stats too. I don't think it is unreasonable to expect that the Liberty have their franchise icon, right? Like they're gunning for the playoffs for the first time since 2017. It's a franchise that's been in a little bit of disarray, so to speak, right? We got year 1 at Barclays. It's big time with the Liberty, the Nets. It's not just Sabrina that got like Betnijah Laney, it's big time there. I wouldn't put it past them to try to run up some numbers, not like at the expense of wins, obviously. I'm just saying, like, I would not think it's unreasonable if they tried to get this statistic going.
So that's why I said those 8 games were a hedge, because, you know, I said 20, but if you take 8 games away, it's 12. I think it's doable, especially with this this crazy stretch that's going to happen, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But a couple of not necessarily back to backs, but a short stretch where they're playing a lot of games.
So this is kind of a weird question, but like, what individually about Sabreena stood out to you from these first 3 games? Because I know most people are going to think of game winner, you know, opening night against Indiana. I'm just curious, was there anything else that really stood out to you from her?
Yes. So I was listening to a post-game interview of hers where she was talking about, it was after the second game, she was talking about how she's still trying to figure out when to be a scorer versus a passer, and that she admits that she was overpassing early on. And that is a crazy thing to me, because she at this point, she's still very much a reactive passer. She's only played 6 games professionally. But when she starts to become a proactive passer, when she starts to dictate what the defense is going to do rather than watching them rotate and then making the reads, when she starts shifting the defense with her eyes and doing all of that, it's going to unlock so many more scoring and passing opportunities. And so she's a consummate playmaker. She has enough to be a very, very dangerous scorer, and just that balancing act that she's trying to do is going to be a fascinating thing going forward.
Yeah, for me, I think what really stands out is just the 2-man combo that she already has with Laney. I'm not sure that I gave enough credit to New York for identifying what a outstanding complementary player Laney would be with Ionescu. And I'm not saying that like Laney's the second star to Sabreena by any means. Like she has had a better career thus far, right? Like she had an outstanding season last year. I'm not trying to put her like below Sabreena in the pecking order at all. It's just the way those two fit together makes so much sense. And I didn't really see that in the offseason. Like obviously you're in New York, you just want to attract talent, and who better than the most improved player who like clearly has just a chip on her shoulder from like every team that's got her around the league. But the way Laney moves off the ball, how aggressive she is as a scorer, it just makes so much sense putting those two together. And I'm really excited to see what it looks like when you get to bring like Natasha Howard in too, because that trio just, I mean, the fit, I just can't wait to see what it looks like.
Right. Yeah. And something I like to talk about quite a lot from an inside the locker room standpoint, a coaching standpoint, is when you have a player with the pedigree from college that Sabreena, when you have that player, and now you're adding in these veterans who have just come off a championship, Sammy Wickham and Natasha Howard, that does everything for, the word culture gets thrown around a lot, but it does help. And Walt Hopkins coming from Minnesota under the Sheryl Reeve coaching tree, like that means something and it matters. And now you have all of these young players following Sabreena and these championship footsteps. I'm not saying they're going to compete for a championship anytime soon, but they're taking steps and accelerating their growth in that way.
Yeah, I really liked the Sammy Wickham edition. I think just archetype, that's exactly the kind of player that Walt Hopkins wants, someone who's willing to shoot, who can get in your face a little bit defensively, who can also handle the ball, and she's got that wing size. I loved the fit there. I thought maybe she was a little bit older than what the Liberty were going for, but at a certain point, you need adults in the room. Like, I don't think that is, and like you said, culture gets thrown around a lot, and it's great to just stockpile talent, but when everybody is sort of at the same stage in their career fighting for the same opportunities, I think it gets to be a bit overkill. And I like the idea that Sammy is established. She knows who she is in the league, and she's just at a different place where she can like kind of shepherd the younger players while also just providing an example of what they're supposed to look like. So I just love having her there. Obviously, like New York just got rid of one of their other veterans today. I don't particularly care to talk about that because she hasn't, I mean, Laisha Clarendon hasn't played much this season, so not a lot of film to look at there, but having Sammy and Natasha, I think, is just going to be super helpful in terms of, like you said, that pedigree, right? Like you've got the young players who all excelled at a really high level in college, and then you've got those two players who have won multiple championships. Natasha's got 3, right? And it's a really exciting combination. I didn't think it would come together this fast. Like I was very prepared to say, oh, they just beat the Fever twice, but then they beat a really good Lynx team. And I understand that Lynx team is not whole yet, and they did not have the type of training camp that Sheryl Reeve would want. But beating a Sheryl Reeve team never goes unnoticed. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. And the way they did it.
Whooping a Sheryl Reeve team.
Yes. She even she admitted that they smelled blood and they went for the jugular right away. That's not necessarily something you see out of a young team all that often.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say something that stood out to me, but I think we could say that for later in the show.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that lets us transition into what I'm sure will be a recurring segment is Evin Asks. So I have some knowledge in X's and O's, but for the most part, I have so many more questions about the WNBA, and who better to answer them? I mean, nobody else here, because
among the two of us, I would say, yeah, I am the clear choice to answer these questions, Evan.
You are the expert. Okay, so my question is there any reason why Dallas is waiting in the wings to play games? I ask because both Dallas and the Liberty played on opening night last Friday. By the time Dallas tips off their second game, the Liberty will have played, 4 games? So, yeah. Is there any reason why they played?
So I know with a lot of the teams that share an arena with an NBA team, their schedules are sometimes pushed back a little bit because there just isn't availability to have them in the building, right, for those opening games. So like the Sparks always have a very road heavy schedule to start the season because Staples Center is always busy with the Lakers and the Clippers and even the Los Angeles Kings for the NHL. There just isn't the time for them to play games, and you can't just keep teams on the road all the time, right? So the fact that they're on the road means that they're playing fewer games to start the year, and then their schedules tend to be a little bit backloaded. For Dallas, I can't quite figure the reason because they do not share an arena with their NBA team. Like the Mavericks and the Dallas Stars have their own building. The Dallas Wings do not play there. They play in a college campus. And why they're waiting this long to play games is beyond me. It's kind of unfortunate because, as I'm sure we'll get to later, there is one player on the Dallas Wings who would have really benefited from being able to stock up games in the first week of the season before she had to leave for 3-on-3. Yeah, if the funny thing about the WNBA is like I thoroughly enjoy watching it. I love the product. Their schedules make no sense. Like, first of all, they don't release them until like 2 weeks before the season starts, which is just wonderful from a planning perspective. You know, what else could you possibly want? And now with the Commissioner's Cup, they had to make sure that all of these Commissioner's Cup games took place during the first half of the season. So that introduces like an added element of variability. Just for those of you who don't know about the Commissioner's Cup, it's basically an in-season tournament where regular season games count towards the standings of the cup. So every team, their first home and road games against opponents of the same conference. So like, let's say the Sparks, the first time they play in Seattle against the Storm and the first time they play in LA against the Storm, both of those games count towards the Commissioner's Cup standings. And so then their record in those 10 games is their Commissioner's Cup record, and the 2 teams in each conference that have the highest record in the Commissioner's Cup standings will meet for the cup after the Olympic break in Phoenix. Okay.
Wow. That's not complicated at all.
It's not, right? Yeah. So making sure that each team in the WNBA gets those 10 games knocked out in the first half of the season, I assume is like this extra layer of logistical complications, which is why it seems like a lot of teams are, knocking out a lot of games really quickly because, they just, in addition to securing all of the arena dates, they have to make sure that they get these 10 games taken care of, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so
I like the idea of the Commissioner's Cup. In case it was unclear from the garble that I just threw at you, I think it's pretty cool that there is additional stakes added to the regular season. I like the fact that conference games mean something again, because if you're unaware, the WNBA playoff format does not seed by conference. It just seeds by record. So you get this added layer of, intra-conference rivalries. You add some extra stakes to regular season games. And there's an additional $500K as prize money for the winner of the Commissioner's Cup, which might not seem like a lot, but the total salary of a WNBA team is $1.3 million this year. So you add an additional $500K to that. That's a lot of money.
Whew, okay, well.
Sorry. I know we didn't intend to go in that direction, but that's just.
No, I have a lot of things to cross off Evin Asks now. You answered a lot of my questions so far. Okay. So actually that perfectly allows us to transition into, as I stumble over my segue. So that kind of transitions us into our game of the week, or since this is our first episode, our games of the week featuring the same matchup. The Storm played the Aces. The first game was a part of the Commissioner's Cup. Yes?
That's correct.
So, okay. I'm learning. But the second game was not, because both games were in Seattle.
Exactly. So only the first game in Seattle counts towards the cup.
Okay. So I'm learning so much today. Would you like to talk a little bit about what you enjoyed about the games of the week, or that matchup?
Yeah. So I'm just really excited that the WNBA decided to put the finals rematch, not just once, but twice in the first few days of the season. Which is really great, because this is before both of these teams are about to lose a key player to USA basketball for the next few weeks. So I'm really glad they got to play each other at somewhat full strength, although I'm sure the Storm would have much rather had Epiphany Prince and Mercedes Russell back for this game, especially because, bless Candace Dupree, she's not really the center you want guarding Liz Cambage in these situations. But anyway, what was great about these two matchups is that we got to see Seattle excel in one and Vegas excel on the other, despite, I don't think, either team really making many stylistic changes between what they did in game one and game two. It just sort of happened that the execution worked better for one team in one game versus the other. The thing that I noticed about the Storm, which is just so fascinating to me after all of these years, is that they have the very best player in the world in Breanna Stewart. I don't think that is an arguable fact. Like, she is, just count the rings, really, with Breanna. Everything she does, she wins. But this team really seems to go with Sue Bird. Like, when she is getting the ball moving, when she is directing traffic, that is when their offense looks best. That is when their defense looks best, when she is applying pressure at the point of attack on the lead ball handler. For whatever reason, it's been 19 years since the Storm drafted Sue Bird, and they have not yet found a competent backup point guard to mimic what she can do when she is not on the court. But it's so much fun to watch her go. And there was this stretch at the end of the second quarter in that first game of the Storm versus the Aces where you sort of see like exactly what the vision is for what the Storm want to do. You get Sue Bird bringing the ball up the court. She gets into a quick little pick and roll with Candace Dupree, flips the ball to Candace on the baseline. Candace has this habit of settling into pull-up jumpers. I get where that comes from, because she has played on an Indiana Fever offense that has not given her a lot of opportunities to create better shots for some time now. It's not her fault. It's just, when you're a volume scorer, you take the looks that are available to you in an offense that is otherwise not creating good ones.
Yep.
On this particular instance, Candace does a great job of, applying pressure on the basket, getting the Aces in rotation instead of settling for the jumper, kicks it out to the opposite corner, swings around back to Sue Bird on the wing. Asia Wilson has to make a really long close to Sue Bird, and then Sue Bird drains the three. It's just a perfect example of what Seattle does well. They've got shooters who can space the floor at every position, including Dupree, who, although she doesn't really take threes, can, because she's such a good long two taker. You've got just the awareness to move the ball, to the next shooter, because there's always going to be a more open shot than the one that they currently have. And I just loved how they continued to take the advantage and then press it, moving forward rather than settling for the first available look. And it all starts with Sue, because I like Jordan Canada's game a lot. For whatever reason, it just doesn't fit what the rest of the Storm do at this point.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's Yeah, that was my big thing about studying the Storm offensively is small advantage turns into big advantage. You put the defense in rotation and you keep them in rotation and you make them pay. You're going to find an opening, you're going to make them pay. Defensively, the biggest shift between game 1 and game 2 for me is that Jackie Young made shots. So there's this coachingism that I say all the time. If any of my players are watching, I'm sorry, you're hearing this again. But so the game plan when you're laying one out as a coach is it's about what you are willing to live with. If you try to take something away, you take that thing away and then you live with the rest. If you try and take everything away, you're going to end up giving everything up. So what I liked from their game plan is in game 1, it's about the Storm basically dared Jackie Young to beat them. The Storm said, if Jackie is putting up shots, it means there are less shots to go around. Cambage, the reigning MVP, AJ Wilson, they aren't getting their shots. In game 2, the biggest difference, based on what I've seen, is that she hit her shots. She went 10 for 10 from the free throw line. And if that happens, I've never spoken to Dan Hughes. I would love to, but I would like to ask Dan Hughes if he's okay with that result, because it's not as if Aja and Liz went for 40 each or anything. Mm-hmm. It's just that's the way they game planned, and you live with the result.
Absolutely. And I do think a lot of what went wrong for Seattle in that second game was they just missed more threes than you would expect from a team with their caliber of shooters, right? They only made 7 3-pointers in the second game versus double digits in the first one. And, if they hit a couple threes during that first, what was it, like a 15-0 run that Vegas had to end the first quarter in that matchup, like we're looking at an entirely different game here. But I'm glad you brought up Jackie, because I think about this like far too often. What if Sabreena had just declared in 2019 for the WNBA draft instead of waiting till 2020? She obviously would have been picked by the Aces. And what would that team look like with Ionescu in her place? It like keeps me up at night, because I love the fit of Sabreena in Vegas so much. But it's really nice to see what Jackie's capable of doing, because she's just a more physical player at that position than most people in the league. And you see it when she's willing to take the ball to the basket and exert her strength advantages. It's really impressive to watch her just basically get to whatever spot she wants to on the court. Like, she's never going to be the type of shooter that, maybe some people would like to see in that Vegas backcourt, but it's really nice to just see her play to her strengths quite literally. And that was very much on display in the first quarter there.
Yeah. So much to process there. I can't even, I haven't thought about that. Sabreena on the Aces. That's breaking my brain. Whew. But
I was convinced she was going to do it, honestly. Like, I was stunned when she decided to return to Oregon. But.
Yeah. Well, I guess Sabreena is as good a segue as any to another big playmaking guard, Chelsea Gray, who came over from the this might hurt you, but came over from the Sparks.
Yeah.
She was a big driver of the success the Aces had in the second game. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's another recurring segment on this podcast, in addition to Evin Asks, is going to be Sabreena gets super sad about what the Sparks have become. And number 1 on that list is Candace Parker, but a close second is the last of Chelsea Gray. For the thing that I love about Chelsea Gray's game more than anything is the flair that she delivers on her passes. I mean, she puts the ball, delivers it with pinpoint accuracy, but she also just makes it look like so much fun. And that cannot be overstated, because this is an aesthetic, sport right here, right? Like, we're watching to enjoy ourselves. It's not just all about whether the ball goes in the basket or not. It's like whether they're having a good time doing it. And Chelsea Gray is always having a good time as the point guard. That one just dot that she delivered to Dearica Hamby on the fast break at the very end of the first half, just just beautiful stuff, right? And like
Yep.
it's exactly what you want the aces to do is get going in transition, right? Like you've got Kelsey Plums, she's on the wing, you know, spacing the floor in transition. You've got, I believe, another shooter on the other side. And then there's just that slightest little opening for Hamby running through the paint, and Chelsea Gray finds it exactly while, you know, twisting her head to the side a little bit to give it the effect of a no look without actually being a no look. It's very much a Chelsea Gray special.
Right.
But I'm really excited about that Chelsea Gray Kelsey Plum combination. We were talking about this earlier, how saying Chelsea and Kelsey is going to be a bit of a thing for us going forward. But it does bother me that Bill Laimbeer does not just start his best players. I do think that Gray and Plum would be just a phenomenal starting backcourt because they both have elements of being the one and the two. You know, Chelsea is kind of a point guard in that she is really great at reading the floor and delivering the ball where it needs to go. But she also functions really well off ball because when there has been a slight advantage created, she can just, you know, manipulate the court much better, like on a 4-on-3 or something of that nature. And Kelsey Plum is kind of a little too small to be a shooting guard, but she's just an incredible scorer, incredible shooter. And the fact that she and Chelsea can sort of rotate those roles, I think gives the Aces a lot of versatility in that backcourt. So, of course, Bill Laimbeer decided to start Raquana Williams instead of Kelsey Plum because that is what Bill Laimbeer's wanted to do. And it's so funny to me because as someone who covered the Sparks for the last few years, Raquana Williams will tell everyone who asks how much she loves coming off the bench. So what are you going to want to do with Raquana other than start her, right? So, yeah, I'm sorry.
No.
This is not the bash on Bill Laimbeer hour, although I have more material if we need to get into it.
Okay. To your point, there is this really caught my eye because one of the things I really enjoy about watching the WNBA, not just the product, obviously, but there's more emphasis on you cut in on the players more. And for a time, I think the thing that really drew me to the W was you could actually watch the huddles a lot of the time. The cameras were inside the huddle and you could watch the play breakdown, which is fascinating for me, being a young coach, watching these geniuses just draw stuff up and how they interact with the players. But so there's a play at the 2 minutes left in the third. Chelsea Gray, you could see her, you guys will have it up here. You can see her look to the bench on a Jewel Lloyd free throw. And so she is looking around, organizing, and you can hear her mouth the word strong, which, if you don't know, it's a double stagger screen. So she is pointing in different directions, and I think she's communicating with Kelsey Plum. It's zoomed in on her, so we can't really see, but she goes strong, and then she points me, and then she points back at her, at herself, asking, oh, me. So she was asking who was going to run the play and who it's for. And so she lets Aja know. And so the ball is inbounded. Kelsey pushes the ball up the court, and Chelsea fills to the corner. This is a mouthful. Kelsey swings it to Hamby, and then Hamby swings it to Jackie. Oh my goodness, this is a lot. Rhyming names and everything. And then both of them set the double stagger for Chelsea coming out of the corner. She gets an open three. It misses, but it's that thing where, yeah, they're interchangeable. Like, who is the point guard? Who is handling the ball? Chelsea is, correct me if I'm wrong, big. She's big enough to be a 2 or a 3, size-wise, attacking-wise. But for all intents and purposes, when she's on the floor, you'd rather her have the ball in a traditional lead guard because of the passes she's able to make, the reads she's able to make. And that interchangeability is huge, especially for a team that was just in the finals and did not have a lot of key pieces in the bubble last year.
Yeah, I think, the loss of Kayla McBride is a little understated when we talk about the Aces. Like, I know a lot of people who root for Vegas just didn't think McBride bought enough last year. And I'm not one of those people. I honestly think that just the fact that Kayla is able to take a defender away and allow the rest of the action to run 4-on-4 gives them so much space. Like, I know I was giving Bill Langford grief earlier, but the amount of movement they get in their half-court sets, even the ones that don't directly lead to three-pointers, is really impressive. what Vegas is able to create in the half court. And I think they're gonna, just miss that spacing a little bit that McBride creates, because once Kelsey Plum goes away for 3-on-3, they don't really have a knockdown shooter who can just demand one defender on her own. Like Raquana Williams is streaky, and Chelsea Gray is not just someone who's going to put the ball up like without conscience, like McBride or Plum or somebody like that. So I do think that the spacing is going to be something to look out for. Like, when is it not with Vegas? But I am just so impressed at how much movement they're able to get in the half court, regardless of the fact that they're not creating these long range shots. Like, watching high-low between Liz and A'ja Wilson is so much fun. And they create these really, like, there's like an action in the first half where like A'ja Wilson sets a screen for Liz Cambage, and then like Candace Dupree is trying to front Liz, and you can't really front Liz when she's 6'8" and you're Candace Dupree. And Jackie Young just sort of, lofts it over to Liz. The interior passing between those two bigs is so impressive, and the way that they create openings for them, despite the fact that like this is not a team that has a good deal of traditional spacing, is really great to watch. And I'm so glad Cambage is back, because I was a little worried about what it was going to look like with her and A'ja, given that A'ja occupied so much real estate closer to the basket last year. But A'ja is just such a terrifying player, like basically anywhere in the paint, that like the fact that she has a center now next to her who can move, unlike Carolyn Swartz, let's say, is just an immense improvement, right?
100% agree.
Yeah.
Oh, Carolyn Swartz. Oh, I was.
You might have to like bleep that part out of the podcast later. I apologize, Evan.
Redacted.
Foul language.
Oh, right. Well, I had a story, but for another time. There's no. Yeah. If we're gonna X that out, that's all right. Okay. So, learned quite a bit. The insights of a coach aren't necessarily always the most interesting. So just because I get so caught up in like, oh, how did this happen, that sometimes forget to enjoy the joy of the game. Yeah. So yeah,
I think the Aces are going to do a really good job of that this year, just because they have a lot of personality on their team, and it's going to be great to watch. But, speaking of one player who just returned this season in Liz Cambage, I believe you wanted to share something about another player who opted out last year, who has come back with a vengeance to start the season.
Jonquel Jones opted out of last season. So the last time she was officially on a WNBA floor was in the 2019 finals, playing against the Mystics. She has come back in a big way. I don't know of many other centers who have started the season 6 for 10 from 3, but she's such a weapon that I would like to break it down in a film/set breakdown setting. So if you're new to me, this is kind of what I do. If you like it, great. Strap in. If you don't, sorry. Here we go.
I think you'll change your mind.
So the first play we're going to looking at is a concept called roll and replace. So, well, first of all, this skip pass by January is just awesome. Second, you have DeWanna Bonner setting a ball screen and rolling, and Jonquel replacing. So this action is effective because you lift the low player, in this case, Jonquel, and that forces the defense to change who tags or who helps on the roller. Ends up with a bucket here. So the second play now is not on the side, it's in the middle of the floor. Jonquel is low, so Bree is the ball screener. As January comes off, Bree starts to roll, but ends up setting a Veer, which is when a player who set the ball screen goes to set a screen for a player off the ball right after the ball screen. So Jonquel comes off, pops for 3. And now we're looking at this. There's a lot of terminology getting thrown around here, but I'll try to explain it as best I can. So this first action is an Iverson or overcut, and that's what January is doing here. Napheesa Heidemann sets a screen here so Bree can slice or shuffle cut, which is an interchangeable term. And so Bree gets great post position. Heidemann then gets a screen in a screen the screener, which normally you see abbreviated to or shortened to STS. Screen the screener action, but it doesn't really matter about that screen here because great post position, great move, bucket. So for this one, it's called exit action. Jonquel is going to start from the left slot, which is lane line extended, and she's going to go down to about the basket area. And then, shout out to the always great Jasmine Thomas, she's going to get an exit screen. Gets the exit, pops, corner three-pointer, hand in the face, does not matter. For this one, slight variation. January is dribbling at Jonquel, so Jonquel cuts through. DeWanna Bonner sets a ball screen, while at the same time, Jasmine Thomas is setting that exit screen. And, Jonquel open misses, but Jasmine Thomas draws the foul because you have to fight through to get to Jonquel. Yep. So just a little bit of fun stuff to look forward to going forward, because when you have a center with that much versatility and Sabrina's picked to be the scoring leader this season in DeWanna Bonner. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Then so many good things can happen. And the crazy thing about it is that's not even what I think the Sun are best at. The Sun are a dynamite defensive team, and I just talked about everything they can do on offense. So sky's the limit, I think.
Yeah, what's interesting is I was so worried about the Sun this year because I have a tremendous amount of respect for Kurt Miller's play designs. Like, I do think that he optimizes his talent better than just about anybody in the league. But I was very worried about what the absence of Alyssa Thomas was going to mean just in terms of the energy they had on the floor. And maybe we'll see that later on in the year, like in the doldrums when you're getting to like game 26 or something and you're playing in 3 different cities during the week. But I kind of forgot how good Jonquel Jones is. She is just an incredible talent. Like, you think about the fact that she and Chelsea Gray were traded for one another, basically just draft day deal. The Sparks decided they didn't need another big, so they got Chelsea, and Connecticut got Jonquel. And I think it was a good decision for both sides, very much so. But she's just a unique talent. Like, I mean, the way that she can basically function anywhere on the court, there aren't a lot of players like her.
No. And that's what helps the setup of that offense is genuinely how many centers can do that. And even if your center can hit open threes, how many centers have the mobility to cut off in that exit screen action or in that screen the screener and then roll replace and stuff like that? It's crazy. It's crazy.
She looks like a guard in some of those sets, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, speaking, if we're already in film corner, which is not what we're going to call this segment, but since we're here and I teased it earlier, I would like to talk a little bit more about the New York Liberty, because they are the other team that went 3-0. So Connecticut, New York, both 3-0. There's no need for me to keep talking about this. We're just going to jump into the clips. Okay, so for this, I just wanted to emphasize the value of maximizing the spacing around Sabreena. For this one, we have Becca Allen and Sammy Whitcomb on the weak side, and Betnijah Laney in the corner with Shook setting a ball screen. Here, the Lynx have to hedge to contain Sabreena, but then look at what happens. Shepherd has to rotate over to tag Shook, which leaves Crystal Dangerfield having to zone up against 2 great shooters. Whitcomb is going to lift, and that leaves Crystal to decide if she's going to stay low with Allen or follow Sammy. That leaves Becca with a lot of space to cut into, and Dantas, who had to hedge, has a really long way to go to recover. It doesn't end up in a basket, but Liberty get free throws out of this. This next set, empty pick and roll, which is, it's a shorthand of saying the corner is empty. There's no player there, so the tag that normally comes or the help that comes from there isn't there. Same personnel. Laney sets a step-up ball screen and then rolls into the empty space. And then she receives the ball, and here's what's crazy. 3 converge on her. Banham and Aerial Powers switch. I think there was a miscommunication there. Shepherd comes all the way over from the other corner to tag the roller. Fouls is in, drop. Laney kicks the ball out to Shook for an open three, and that forces Powers to come over. And then Sabrina is wide open.
And what has become her favorite spot at Barclays Center, if I'm to understand that correctly?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so for this one, just real quick before we jump in, Miami action is a shorthand for basically two players are going to screen for the player coming out of the corner. Not always, but for the most part, that's what's known as Miami action. The difference between this and others is that it's a dribble handoff, and then the second screen is a ball screen. Sabrina pitches the ball to Whitcomb here, who then proceeds to get a ball screen. Allen cuts through. So that's the key here. Because Kayla McBride has tag responsibility. So she comes over and touches Allen. And there's a miscommunication, I believe. So Dantas has to chase, and that timed with Jasmine Jones's lift makes it a really difficult closeout for Kayla. She's able to get there, and it is a miss, but early in the season, that's what you want to see out of your players. The process works. It's just the shot didn't drop. Here, roughly the same action with a little bit of variation. Miami, Allen cuts through, and then she flashes her hands. So she's a threat inside. But the key here is the communication between the two defenders. This time around, Kayla jumps out of the way so she can stay on Jones. And so that is roughly contained. Beck flashes her hands inside. That exact second, Stokes sets a screen for Sabrina. It flows into another ball screen, and it looks like it stagnates a little bit. But ultimately, Sammy Whitcomb is able to convert on a tough two here. So making something out of nothing after great action. For a young team, it's really important, and I really enjoy seeing it.
Yeah, and like we said, that's sort of why you bring in the veterans, right? Like once the play breaks down, they have enough institutional know-how to know what comes next.
Yeah, 100%.
The play beyond the play. Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly it.
All right. So is there anything in particular you're looking forward to this week, Evin?
Well, I think I have a feeling you're going to touch on the exact same thing that I want to talk about, but I would rather you talk about it. So there's a returning player. Well, there are going to be a couple of players who are returning, but the one I am most excited about is somebody who I did a whole 9.5-minute video on for their footwork. And yeah, shameless plug by me. I'll link that in the description below.
Yeah, so I mean, who Evan's talking about obviously is the queen, Napheesa Collier, who has yet to return from Minnesota. And the reason why I am not giving too much credence to the Lynx losing their first two games, which incidentally has never happened before in the Sheryl Rivera. So something to keep an eye on. Collier is returning from overseas to play for the first time. Hopefully that's going to be on Thursday. It might come later in the week. But if you're wondering about where the name of our podcast comes from, the step through, Napheesa Collier is really damn good at it. And the video that Evan's going to link to shows exactly what that looks like. I just thoroughly enjoy watching Collier's game. I kind of think of her as like a few years behind of what Stewie is in terms of the evolution of her path. Like you could kind of see when the two of them matched up in the WNBA semifinals last year, how Brianna has better physical measurements. Obviously, she's a little bit bigger. She's longer. She can contest more shots than Napheesa can, but Napheesa is such a good, solid player. And like her footwork is tremendous. Obviously, like you wouldn't have spent 9.5 minutes on it if it weren't the case. And she can just do everything on the court, right? Like she toggles really nicely between the 3 and the 4. So that allows Minnesota to play those bigger lineups with like Dantas and fouls at the 4 and 5, along with Collier. Or you can go a little bit smaller and play Collier at the 4 and then, play another one of those bigs at the 5 individually. She can shoot from everywhere on the court. She's just incredibly solid at sealing and getting those post ups. I love watching Napheesa Collier seal in the post. It's one of my very favorite things to see. And tremendous defender. Just, always has an eye for where the ball is supposed to be, can read any action. It's only her third year in the league. It's insane. This is only her third year in the league. I really think she's already one of the best 6 to 8 players in the league. She was all WNBA second team last year, so I'm not alone in that belief. I can't wait to watch her play again. And I had very high expectations for Minnesota entering the season. I was too chicken to actually pick them as my champion this year. I don't regret it yet because until Stewie loses, I'm not going to pick against her.
Safe bet.
But I cannot wait to watch what this idealized version of Minnesota looks like. And the first step to that happening is Collier coming back.
Oh, I mean, that's why I let you go, because I have all the same thoughts. There is, in no world could I have articulated them the way that you did. And so there's nothing really more for me to add.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for listening to our first episode. Yeah.
I think that's a great way to end it. Just the stumble and the
stumble. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have our socials are here. It's that at least is mapped out. The like and subscribe, you don't have to do that because for right now it's just my channel, but we'll have that out at some point and we'll iron stuff out. And if for some reason you're following me but you're not following Sabreena, why?
Or vice versa. You should fix that.
Yeah, I'll take that. But I think that's going to be it for us. Happy weekend.
Yeah, and if there's anything that catches your eye during the week, during these WNBA games that you want us to take a closer look at, just let us know and hopefully we can pick it up on next week's show.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Sabreena. Thank you for teaching me things. I learned so very much, and I have so many more questions to ask in future episodes. Ask Evin is going to be a recurring segment. So thank you.
Can't wait.
All right. Bye.